Left or right? It seems like a never-ending argument that goes nowhere. But what are we even arguing about? Why do people passionately argue for their side when they don't understand what each side represents? Does the common spectrum even make sense? The Political Spectrum Part 1. The Nonsensical Spectrum. Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and if you want to support our channel and our mission of encouraging discussion, not division, please join us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Doing some research recently, I saw this depiction of the U.S. political spectrum on several sites. Since politics is an artificial construct, in that respect it is fine. And it is a very common view. This spectrum spans between the far left, focusing on equality, and the far right, focusing on control. This spectrum has the dangers of communism on the left and fascism on the right. Again, this is pretty standard, and many accept it as a given. Yet, does this make sense? The simple answer is no. One problem is the entire equality versus control framework. While communism does focus on equality, at least in rhetoric, how is that any less controlling than fascism? Both systems are totalitarian forms of government. Totalitarian governments get their name from their total control over everything. Another problem is the use of authoritarianism, as the word authoritarian has different meanings, which results in confusion. One use of authoritarianism is in contrast to democracy. In this sense, both fascism and communism are authoritarian governments. Yet, another use of authoritarianism is in contrast to totalitarianism. The significant difference between authoritarian and totalitarian governments is over the degree of control. Unlike totalitarian dictators, authoritarian dictators are only concerned with their well-being and control of the government. These dictatorships run on the principle that if you don't bother them, they will ignore you. This may seem like authoritarian dictators are better, yet not always. Since totalitarian governments involve themselves in everything, they get involved in food, housing, healthcare, and education, things that authoritarian dictators often ignore. One example of this difference can be seen in Nicaragua, when the Sandinistas took control in 1979. Prior to that, the Somozas family had run the country as an authoritarian dictatorship since 1927. Thus, when the Sandinistas took over, Nicaragua went from an authoritarian dictatorship to a totalitarian one. The difference was most visible to the Miskito, a native ethnic group that lived along the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua. Somozas had pretty much ignored them, and they generally ignored Somoza. When the Sandinistas took over, they began to dictate how they should live, which did not go well. As a result, the Miskito became an active part of the opposition. Returning to the spectrum, it correctly places authoritarianism to the left of fascism because to control some is less than controlling everything. Yet, it incorrectly places it to the right of communism, which, like fascism, seeks to control everything. A similar problem occurs between socialism and conservatism, as the latter is strongly capitalistic. Capitalism is based on the free market, yet socialism is based on planning and therefore requires more control. So how is conservatism more controlling than socialism? There is a third problem with more recent expressions of left-wing politics, which argue for speech codes and political correctness. things resisted by the right. So why, on this spectrum, are those arguing for more control placed further away from the control of society than the groups resisting those controls? Another more basic problem is that equality can only be maintained by government control, and is exactly what we see. Those on the left call for a larger, more centralized government, while those on the right argue for a smaller, more decentralized government. Perhaps the biggest problem with this political spectrum is that it claims to be a U.S. political spectrum. Yet, of the 7 classifications, only 2 actually exist in contemporary U.S. politics in any significant number: liberal and conservative. Center is not too bad if this is a stand-in for moderate independent, those who do not fit cleanly into left or right. There are a very small number of socialists, but they generally ally themselves with the Democrats, such as Sanders and Mondami. As for communism, authoritarianism, and fascism, they exist only in hyperbolic rhetoric of various political attacks. While a diligent search may turn up a handful, as in a country of 340 million, you can find a few supporters of virtually any point of view. They play no role in contemporary politics beyond the hyperbolic rhetoric used to attack opponents. For U.S. politics in the 21st century, these terms can be categorized with monarchists, terms of historical value, not something anyone actually argues for today. They may be relevant elsewhere in the world, but not in U.S. politics. This brings us to perhaps the worst problem. This spectrum is divisive. It encourages people to see their political opponents as the extreme opposite, and thus label them communist and fascist. While they only exist in hyperbolic rhetoric and not reality, that rhetoric is far too prevalent. Effective and successful democracy relies on open, honest, and productive discussion of opposing points of view with the goal of building consensus and not defeating opponents. That can't happen when you call your opponent a communist or a Nazi. Discussions that focus on defeating the opponent tear at the fabric of democracy. As a result, they make effective democracy harder. If this spectrum doesn't work, what would be better? We will explore that in part 2. So what do you think? Do you disagree? Do you think the equality versus control spectrum makes sense? Do you think communism, authoritarianism, and fascism are alive and well in modern American politics? What do you think is more important, building consensus or defeating opponents? Tell us why in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we do read the comments and often post replies. If you made it this far in the video, consider watching one of our other videos and supporting our channel on Patreon. Thank you for watching Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas.